She moved deep into the Montana wilderness to forget the past, but the past wasn't the only thing that had followed her. One frost-covered morning, Vanessa Miller, a former combat medic carrying wounds no one could see, spotted a wild Mustang struggling through the snow, dragging something heavy behind it. The harsh Montana winter had blanketed the landscape in white, the cold air sharp and biting against her face as she made her way through the silent trees. Vanessa had come here for solitude. Months ago, she'd fled the chaos of her life, retreating into the remote wilderness to escape memories that haunted her every waking moment. The memories of her son, a soldier who never came home, were the heaviest burden she carried. Every day was a battle with grief, and the silence of the mountains was her only refuge. But the mountains held more than peace. They held stories, struggles, and sometimes unexpected encounters. As Vanessa rounded a bend in the trail, her eyes caught the shape of a wild horse moving slowly, its hooves sinking into the deep snow. It was dragging something tied behind it, a large, dirty bag, torn in places and snagged on branches as the horse fought its way forward. The animal's dark eyes glistened with a mix of exhaustion and determination. Vanessa stopped, instinctively cautious, yet drawn by concern. She studied the Mustang carefully. Wild and free by nature, this horse was clearly in distress. It was unusual to see such an animal struggle like this in the wilderness, especially with a burden that slowed its progress so much. She took a slow step forward, careful not to alarm it. The snow crunched underfoot and the horse paused, nostrils flaring in the cold air. It seemed to hesitate, as if weighing whether to run or accept help. Something about the scene pulled at Vanessa's heart, a silent call she couldn't ignore. She approached slowly, reaching for the heavy bag. The coarse fabric was rough against her gloved hands, wet with melting snow. As she struggled to untie the knots, she heard a faint, desperate noise from inside. Her breath caught in her throat. With gentle care, she pulled back the fabric to reveal a tiny foal, shivering violently, barely clinging to life. Its coat was matted and streaked with dirt, frost forming on its fur. Its eyes, half open, were filled with fear and exhaustion. The foal trembled as weak, shallow breaths escaped its throat. Vanessa's heart nearly stopped. She had seen the horrors of war up close, but this fragile creature stirred something deeper inside her, a raw, protective instinct that refused to let go. She wrapped the foal in her jacket, holding it close against her body to warm it. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. There was no time for sorrow now. This little life depended on her. The wild Mustang watched silently, her dark eyes steady and watchful. It was clear she was the mother, desperate, protective, and willing to do anything to keep her foal alive. Vanessa knelt in the snow, whispering softly to the horse and the baby. She felt the weight of her own loneliness lift slightly as a new purpose filled the space where pain had lived. This was a chance for healing, for connection, not just for the foal, but for herself. She searched the bag carefully and found a few pieces of cloth, some scraps of food, and a small water bottle half frozen. Using the limited resources, Vanessa began tending to the foal's needs. She cleaned the dirt and ice from its eyes and fur, wrapping it securely in the cloth for extra warmth. The horse moved closer, as if sensing Vanessa's kindness. The bond between human and animal was fragile but immediate. In the vast wilderness, two beings broken in different ways had found each other. Vanessa thought about the months she'd spent alone, haunted by memories of war, loss, and silence. The wilderness had been her refuge, but also her prison. Now, with this tiny life in her arms, the wilderness seemed full of possibility again. Her mind wandered to her son, the soldier who never returned. She hadn't spoken his name aloud in months, but in the quiet of the snow-covered mountains, she whispered to herself and the foal, "You're not alone anymore." The day wore on, and Vanessa built a small shelter with branches and blankets from her pack. She fed the foal what little she could and wrapped it tightly against the chill night that was beginning to fall. As darkness enveloped the forest, Vanessa sat close to the fire she managed to spark, the foal nestled against her chest. The wild Mustang stood nearby, watching, waiting. In that moment, surrounded by snow and silence, Vanessa felt the stirrings of hope, fragile like the foal, but real. The past still lingered, but for the first time in a long time, the future seemed worth facing. Vanessa's breath formed small clouds in the cold mountain air as she carefully settled the tiny foal into the shelter she had fashioned from fallen pine branches and the spare blankets in her pack. The fire's warm glow flickered against the dark woods, and for a moment the wilderness seemed to hold its breath. Her hands were steady despite the fatigue that weighed on her body. Years of medical training and battlefield experience had taught her how to stay calm in emergencies. But this was different. This was life hanging by the thinnest thread, a fragile bond between hope and despair. The foal was barely alive when she found it, and Vanessa knew its survival depended on more than just warmth and shelter. She needed to act quickly, drawing on every ounce of skill she possessed. She wrapped the foal snugly in the softest cloth she had, trying not to jostle it too much. Its tiny chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Vanessa gently lifted the foal's head, brushing frost from its eyelashes. Its wide eyes met hers briefly, filled with confusion and trust. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming urge to protect this helpless creature, a mother's instinct, though she had never been a mother herself. Vanessa rummaged through her pack, pulling out a small first-aid kit she'd brought for emergencies. Carefully, she cleaned the foal's tiny wounds, scrapes and cuts from whatever ordeal it had endured before the Mustang had found her. Her fingers worked methodically, despite the chill that crept into her bones. As the minutes passed, Vanessa sang softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The sound seemed to calm the foal, and for the first time since she'd found it, the baby's breathing steadied. The foal nuzzled closer, seeking warmth and comfort. Vanessa allowed herself a small smile, though sadness lingered beneath her skin. She had fled to these mountains to escape her own memories, memories of her son who never came home. The grief had settled like a heavy fog over her heart, but now, cradling this tiny life, she felt a flicker of purpose and connection she hadn't felt in months. The wild Mustang, the foal's desperate mother, remained nearby, watching with eyes that held pain and gratitude. Vanessa understood the unspoken trust forming between them, a fragile alliance born of need and survival. As night deepened, the temperature dropped sharply. Vanessa wrapped the foal in an extra layer of blankets, pressing it close to her body to share her warmth. The fire crackled low, its light flickering against the dark trees. Despite the exhaustion pulling at her eyelids, Vanessa knew sleep wasn't an option. The foal's fragile state demanded constant vigilance. She thought about the past, the war zones she'd worked in, the patients she'd treated, the friends lost, and the son she mourned. Each memory was a heavy stone in her chest. But here, in the silence of the Montana wilderness, something new was beginning, a chance for healing. For both her and the foal, hours passed like this, the night stretching endlessly. Vanessa whispered soft encouragements, speaking gently as she monitored the foal's breathing and pulse. Slowly, the tiny creature began to stir, lifting its head weakly and nuzzling her hand. Vanessa's heart soared with hope. Morning light filtered through the trees, casting pale rays onto the snow-covered ground. Vanessa wrapped the foal securely and started a slow trek back toward her small cabin. The journey would be difficult, but the foal's survival depended on the care she could provide there. With the foal nestled against her chest, Vanessa moved steadily through the snow. The Mustang followed, keeping a cautious distance but never losing sight of her baby. The wild horse's presence was a reminder of resilience. and the fierce bond between mother and child. A bond Vanessa yearned to understand and embrace in her own way. Back at the cabin, Vanessa created a warm, safe space for the foal. She used old blankets, straw from the barn, and anything she could find to make a soft bed. She warmed milk carefully on the stove and fed the foal drop by drop, watching closely for signs of strength or distress. Days turned into weeks, and the tiny foal began to grow stronger. Vanessa named her Hope, a fitting symbol of the fragile optimism that now filled her heart. The bond between them deepened, Vanessa's care and determination matched by Hope's resilience and will to survive. Healing was slow and painstaking. Vanessa had to manage infections, feedings, and the foal's delicate body, but she never wavered. Each small improvement brought joy, a reminder that life, even in its most fragile form, could triumph against the odds. Through Hope, Vanessa found a path out of her own darkness. Caring for the foal required her to focus beyond her pain, to nurture and protect something pure and vulnerable. It was both a challenge and a balm for her wounded soul. The wilderness, once a place of isolation, now felt alive with possibility. The wind through the pines whispered encouragement. The quiet companionship of the wild Mustang, who visited often but kept her distance, was a silent blessing. Vanessa began to talk more, sharing stories with Hope, tales of her son, her struggles, and her hopes. The act of speaking aloud helped untangle the knots of grief inside her. The foal, though unable to understand words, responded to her voice with quiet companionship. Together they weathered storms and bright days. Each sunrise brought new hope, each moment a step toward healing. Vanessa knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she no longer felt alone. The foal's fragile life had become her mission, a beacon guiding her through the wilderness of pain and loss. In caring for Hope, Vanessa discovered the strength to face her past and embrace the future. The rescue wasn't just about saving a foal, it was about reclaiming life itself. The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly around Vanessa and Hope, a vast, rugged sanctuary where the quiet seemed to hold its own kind of magic. As the days grew longer and the bitter cold began to soften into spring's promise, something extraordinary was unfolding, a story not just of survival, but of healing. Vanessa sat outside her cabin, the gentle warmth of the morning sun melting the last of the frost on the ground. Hope, now stronger and more lively, trotted nearby, her legs gaining strength with each passing day. The foal's playful energy was a balm to Vanessa's soul, a living symbol of resilience and rebirth. For months, Vanessa had lived with a weight on her heart she thought she could never lift, the loss of her son. A soldier who never came home, whose absence had hollowed her days and haunted her nights. She had retreated to these mountains to escape those memories, to silence the grief that threatened to swallow her whole. Yet here, in this quiet wilderness, surrounded by the gentle rhythm of nature, Vanessa found herself confronting the past. Instead of running from it, sitting by the edge of a small creek, she watched Hope splash her hooves in the water, chasing reflections and butterflies. The foal was no longer the fragile, trembling creature she'd rescued. She was growing, vibrant, and full of life. Vanessa reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small photo, worn and creased, of her son in uniform. She traced his face with a trembling finger, the ache inside her still raw but no longer paralyzing. "Hi, Jamie," she whispered, speaking to the air as much as to herself. "I'm taking care of someone now, someone who needs me." The act of saying his name aloud felt like a small victory, a crack in the wall she'd built around her grief. The connection between Vanessa and Hope deepened with every day they spent together. Caring for the foal required patience and dedication. Feeding, cleaning wounds, coaxing her to walk when she faltered. but it was also a source of joy and purpose. Hope had begun to trust Vanessa completely. When the foal nuzzled her hand or followed her around the cabin, Vanessa felt a thread of hope weaving itself through her heart. The wild Mustang, Hope's mother, still lingered nearby, often appearing at dusk to watch from a distance. Vanessa had come to respect the wild horse's space, understanding that some bonds were unspoken and delicate. But the Mustang's presence was a reminder of the fierce love and strength that animals could embody. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Vanessa sat beside the fire, Hope resting at her feet. She pulled out her journal and began to write, her thoughts flowing onto the page like a release valve for the emotions she'd long kept bottled inside. She wrote of loss and hope, of pain and healing, of the unexpected gift this little foal had become. In the quiet of the night, the wilderness seemed to listen. Days later, Vanessa took Hope for a slow walk through the forest trails, the foal's hooves padding softly on the leaf-strewn ground. The fresh air filled her lungs, and for the first time in a long while, Vanessa felt at peace. She remembered the trauma of war zones, the screams and cries she'd witnessed as a medic, the loss of her comrades and the unimaginable pain of sending her own son off to a fate she feared. But here, with Hope beside her, the past didn't feel like a weight to carry alone. It was something to acknowledge, to honor, and ultimately to heal from. Vanessa began to see the wilderness as more than a refuge. It was a place of transformation, a wild, untamed space that mirrored the journey she was on inside. The act of caring for Hope had awakened something in Vanessa, a reminder that life, despite its hardships, was resilient, that healing wasn't linear, but a winding path filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. She started to engage more with the local community, attending veterans' meetings and sharing her story when she felt ready. The experience with Hope became a beacon of hope not just for herself, but for others who struggled with invisible wounds. The bond between human and animal had given Vanessa a new sense of purpose. She dreamed of creating a space where veterans could come to heal alongside horses and other animals, finding comfort and strength in their companionship. One afternoon, as she worked to strengthen Hope's legs, Vanessa felt a quiet joy swell inside her. The foal, once barely clinging to life, now galloped freely across the meadow, a blur of energy and spirit. Watching her run, Vanessa understood something profound. Healing was possible, even after unimaginable loss. The wounds might never fully disappear, but they could transform into something that fueled growth and connection. The wild Mustang appeared once again, stepping closer than before. Vanessa saw the fierce love in her eyes, the same fierce love she felt for Hope and quietly for her son. Together, the three of them stood in the fading light, a family formed not by blood, but by shared survival and hope. Vanessa smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in years, she felt whole. The first rays of dawn stretched across the Montana sky, casting a soft golden light over the rugged landscape. The air was crisp, but carried a gentle warmth that spoke of spring's arrival. Vanessa Miller stood at the edge of the clearing near her cabin, breathing deeply, taking in the familiar scents of pine and earth. Months had passed since she had found the tiny, trembling foal dragged through the snow by a desperate wild Mustang. Since then, Hope had grown strong, her legs steady beneath her, her coat glossy in the sunlight, and her spirit full of energy and life. Watching Hope now, Vanessa felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling she had long thought impossible to reclaim. Her grief for her son Jamie, the soldier who never returned home, still lingered. Some mornings, it rose up like a heavy fog, threatening to consume her again, but unlike before, that grief no longer isolated her. Instead, it was tempered by a new purpose and by the connections she had forged. with hope, with the wild Mustang, and with the earth itself. Vanessa knelt beside Hope, running her hands gently over the horse's neck. The bond they shared had grown deeper with every day of care and companionship. Hope was more than a horse. She was a symbol of resilience, a living testament that even the most fragile beginnings could blossom into strength. Vanessa's gaze drifted toward the mountains. Beyond, their peaks still dusted with snow. Here in this wilderness, she had rediscovered herself. She had fled the memories of war and loss, but what she had found was far more. A chance to heal and to help others do the same. Over the past weeks, Vanessa had begun working on a new dream, one that had grown from her own experience of healing alongside hope. She envisioned a sanctuary here in Montana, a place where wounded veterans could come to heal through the power of animal therapy and nature. The idea had sparked after a few tentative conversations with local veterans groups and animal therapists. The more she spoke, the more she realized how many others were searching for a path out of pain, just as she had. This sanctuary would be a refuge, a space to rebuild broken spirits by reconnecting with gentle animals and the wild. Vanessa smiled, softly, recalling her first moments with hope, the desperation, the fear, the fragile breath of a life hanging by a thread. She had never imagined that a foal abandoned in the snow would become her greatest teacher. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft crunch of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw David, a veteran who had recently volunteered to help with the sanctuary preparations. "Morning, Vanessa," he greeted, his breath misting in the cool air. "Morning, David," Vanessa replied, warmth in her voice. "Ready for the fence repairs?" David nodded. "Absolutely. The horses deserve a strong home." Together, they walked toward the barn, the place that would soon be the heart of the sanctuary. The old wooden structure was worn but sturdy, nestled among the trees with sunlight filtering through the branches. As they worked side by side, Vanessa shared her story, the rescue, the healing journey with hope, and her vision for the sanctuary. David listened intently, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of pain and hope Vanessa recognized in herself. "I think this could really help a lot of people," he said quietly. "I know I need it." Vanessa nodded. "That's why we're doing it." The day passed with hard work and shared determination. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Vanessa felt a quiet satisfaction. The sanctuary was becoming real, a place born from loss but built with love. Later, as dusk settled, Vanessa sat outside her cabin, the sky painted with streaks of pink and purple. Hope grazed nearby, the wild Mustang watching from the tree line. Vanessa reached into her pocket and pulled out the worn photograph of Jamie. She traced his face, a gentle smile touching her lips despite the ache in her chest. "I'm ready now, Jamie," she whispered, "to live again, to help others find their way back from the darkness." The stars began to emerge, one by one, shining like tiny beacons in the vast Montana night. Vanessa felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected path she had been given. The foal in the snow, the wild Mustang's desperate journey, and the chance to transform pain into purpose. The road ahead would still have challenges. Healing was never simple or linear. But Vanessa knew she no longer faced it alone. Hope was there. The wild Mustang was there. And soon, so would others, drawn by the promise of new beginnings. As she rose and walked back toward her cabin, the wind whispered softly through the trees, a quiet blessing on a new chapter of life.